Soulsborne is a difficult game series known for its boss fights. You can say what you want about the areas in between, but these games are known for their boss battles. And naturally, in amongst these bosses, you're gonna get the good, the bad, the ugly, the easy, and the difficult. And in this video, I'm gonna showcase the 10 bosses that, in my opinion, are the best in the series. Now, I'm gonna jump right into it, but please keep in mind that first of all, this is all totally my opinion and in absolutely no way objective. And yes, I'm counting Bloodborne as a Souls game, but I am not counting Sekiro. I take into account the fairness, difficulty, and design of the bosses in this video. I try my hardest to keep away from the lore behind them, but no doubt that'll leak in at some point. So, with all that in mind, let's jump right into number 10. Number 10, Cyril. The Iron King's right-hand man, an incredibly skilled swordsman, awaits you in his memory after abandoning the old Iron King to travel around the lands. This duel starts off with Orphan sitting waiting for your arrival before he gets up and the skirmish begins. I really enjoy fights where the boss also has as much movement ability as you, and many of his attacks mean that he jumps backwards once or twice and charges at you with a gliding slash that will either be pretty instant or delayed. Many people criticize Dark Souls 2's gameplay for being stuck in mud and feeling slightly clunky, and despite Dark Souls 2 being my favorite of the trilogy, I would agree with that. But despite that, Alon's agility to jump and bounce around the arena does not feel unfair or out of place at all. Locking onto him means the camera will always be tracking him, and this makes it a lot easier. Now, I personally do not think Dark Souls 2 suffers from quote-unquote terrible hitboxes anywhere near as much as people say it does, but there are absolutely times where I feel like attacks shouldn't hit me, but they do anyway, especially during boss fights. This has never happened to me while battling Cyril. All of his hitboxes are very fair, and despite how large his sword is, he doesn't have incredible reach unless he's stabbing you with it. At the end of each combo, Alon gives you enough time to hit him maybe once or twice, and no more than that, which I think is absolutely brilliant. This truly makes the fight feel like a duel between warriors, both the player and Alon jumping and dashing around the arena in order to deal blows. Cyril's a great boss fight that never feels unfair at any point other than when he's buffed, and even then, he's normally buffed because you made a mistake, and it just feels like a constant adrenaline rush fighting against a skilled warrior that also shares similar agility to the player. The run back to him isn't hell in my opinion either. You just gotta kill a lizard and kill some Alon warriors and that's it. He's gone a little crazy with the polish on his floor, making the arena absolutely beautiful with the light from the windows gleaming on the ground. If you manage to kill him within a few minutes without taking any damage, he will commit seppuku, another minor detail that I absolutely love about this boss fight. And it is for these reasons I believe Cyril deserves a spot in the top 10 bosses in the Souls series. Number 9, Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo. You can't tell me you weren't expecting Humpty Dumpty and Glitchy Sonic to be on this list somewhere. One of the most well-known and renowned bosses in the franchise lands itself at the number 9 spot. Ornstein and Smo is the closest From Software has ever been to getting a gang fight done right. There are a lot of gang bosses throughout the series, but very few share the fairness and superlative qualities of this duo. First of all, I should mention how well they complement each other with their varying movesets. Dragonslayer Ornstein is a very agile and smaller enemy wielding the Dragonslayer Spear, while Executioner Smo is a slower moving brute wielding his great hammer. Ornstein's attacks are faster and more difficult to dodge, but don't hit as hard, and he can jump around to dodge and disorient you, while Smo is in the fray, unleashing much more harder hitting attacks while being much slower and easier to dodge. Ornstein's attacks aren't particularly difficult to dodge, but the fact there's 2 enemies in the arena means that you aren't at any point able to completely tunnel vision on one of them. Ornstein is normally the one close up and attacking you, as he has faster and more reliable ways to get across the arena than Smo does, but Smo's not too slow that you're able to ignore him while skirmishing Ornstein. There are 8 pillars in the arena, and these are absolutely essential of separating them and managing aggro. Smo frequently gets stuck on these pillars, so if you're any good at baiting him into charging into them, it could open up some very good opportunities to attack Ornstein if he's nearby. Likewise, if Ornstein is one far away from you, or if you're going for Super Ornstein, the bottom of the pillars can typically use to absorb Ornstein's lightning projectiles, allowing you to get a bunch of hits on Smo. I don't know if FromSoft intended for these pillars to be used in such a way, but regardless, the arena for this makes it perfect and extremely well designed for managing aggro, and it does take some practice to utilize them appropriately. The fight involves trying to damage one of them enough to trigger the second phase. The fight requires you to memorize and learn both movesets of both of the bosses to ensure you don't get hit by either of them. This fight offers something that no other boss in Demon Souls or Dark Souls up until this point had offered, a true second phase of a boss fight. Not only that, but it offered 2 completely different ones depending on which one you killed first. If you killed Smo first, Ornstein will double in size and drastically change his moveset in the process. Due to Ornstein's much larger size, he is much slower than he was in the first phase, phase and struggles to get around the arena like Smo did, so you can utilize similar strategies here. He has a lot more attacks, most of which are fairly standard and telegraphed, but also gains access to a grab attack that does insane damage if caught by it. This time though, he has no compadres, so you can just focus completely on attacking him and only him. If you kill Ornstein first, Smo will finish him off with his hammer and absorb his lightning powers. His moveset will not change much, but his damage is buffed and lightning is added to each attack. Most would tell you that Super Smo is much easier than Super Ornstein, and I'm inclined to agree. The second phase requires you to learn yet another moveset, and despite being a gank fight, offers a perfectly fair challenge that many players remember as being one of the most satisfying to overcome. Of course, the fight is not without its flaws. Ornstein in phase 1 can frequently glitch out of his charging attacks if he so much as hits a pebble. If he drops the animation, which he often does, it can give you a false sense of security and he'll suddenly turn and hit you with a weird charge. This can feel cheap and it's never fun to get hit by it. But that's all I can really flaw about the fight. All of what I mentioned earlier accompanied by a beautiful Chamber of Anolondo, some of the most memorable music in the game, and the reward of conquering these two guys being the vision of two giant honkers and the bequeathal of the Lord Vessel for warping around the game. I believe all of these reasons make Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo one of the best bosses in the Soulsborne series.
Number 8, Burnt Ivory King. Wait, another Dark Souls 2 boss? What must this guy be thinking? Sure, everyone knows that I adore Dark Souls 2 and there could be some bias, but I truly think that the Burnt Ivory King and Cyril are well deserving of a boss on this list. The way this fight works is that you can travel around Alayam Lois to rescue 3 Lois Knights. These knights, upon being rescued, will assist you in the opening gank of the fight in the Old Chaos. Other Lois warriors will emerge from the portals on either side of the arena, and all of these must be killed in order for the Burnt Ivory King to spawn. The Lois Knights are also very important because if you collect all of them, none of these charred warriors will spawn after the Ivory King's appearance, something that would happen and make the fight a lot more difficult. Normally I'm very much against gank battles, but the opening segment in the Old Chaos before battling the Ivory King is extremely well designed, suiting the lore of the boss perfectly. In this phase, it's extremely important to not get surrounded. This is made easier or harder depending on how many Lois Knights you've rescued. There can be up to 5 or 6 of these charred ones in the arena at once, and the Lois Knights will be on your side fighting them, which is a great way to remove some unfairness from the gank at the beginning. The Lois warriors will sacrifice themselves and block the portals, and once all of them have been closed, a giant one will spawn and the Burnt Ivory King will emerge and battle the player. Just like Cyril, this boss never suffers from the more egregious hitboxes this game has. And it's quite difficult to talk about why this boss is so good without repeating exactly what I said about Cyril. The fight versus the Burnt Ivory King is one of the few fights in Dark Souls 2 that really feels like a duel between 2 warriors. As I mentioned earlier, I really love boss fights where the boss you're facing is the same size as you and has the same amount of agility as you as well. The Burnt Ivory King may not necessarily be able to dodge around the arena, but the lunges he unleashes from his sword can mean that he leaps into the air or dashes across the arena. To make up for this, he has access to many attacks that can close the distance on you extremely quickly, all with different wind-up times, requiring you to look carefully at what he's about to do next. This gets even more essential when he buffs his sword, substantially increasing his range and spicing up his moveset a little. Some of his attacks get slightly faster, but as I've said before, the fight never feels ridiculous at all. All in all, I credit the Burnt Ivory King as having all of the good qualities of Cyril with fantastic lore, a gorgeous arena, and a justifiable gank fight in the Old Chaos before the encounter. I love this battle, and it's for those reasons that I believe the Burnt Ivory King deserves a spot in the top 10 bosses in the series. Number 7, Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower. Let me tell you this right now, I love all of the Hunter battles in Bloodborne. I think Father Gascoigne, Gehrman the First Hunter, and Lady Maria are some of the best bosses in the series, and I think that Lady Maria is the cream of the crop, and undoubtedly one of the most fun and thrilling fights in the series. Her first phase is a very good introduction to the fight and is great preparation for the upcoming 2. At 65% HP, Maria will commit seppuku and gain access to several blood attacks that increase her damage and range, and at 30% she will float again and gain access to fire attacks that further increase her range and the damage she deals. I appreciate this because her fight, instead of transforming into something completely different upon phase transition, it's just the same fight, except harder. Her moveset is pretty much exactly the same throughout all 3 phases with the exception of a few added attacks. It just adds more damage and visual effects to her swings. And unless you're a speedrunner, this seriously changes how you should play the fight. Lady Maria can be parried as all of the hunters in Bloodborne can, but it's no easy task to pull off without an absolute ton of practice, and the later phases just makes it way too much of a risk. If you miss it, you're gonna either die or start panicking to heal from the crazy damage you just took, which is less egregious in the first phase. And that's what I really love about this fight. Lady Maria is a hunter just like like you and just has as much agility as you as well. She can dash around the arena, she whips out Evelyn occasionally in an attempt to parry you, which if she does successfully can lead to one of the most graceful and fitting riposte animations in the series, and all throughout the fight she's unleashing frenzies of extremely quick slashes and combos with her Rakuyo. Maria is a very fast boss, and Bloodborne is a very fast-paced game when compared to Demon's Souls and the Dark Souls trilogy, so Maria's swiftness is perfectly fitted into the game's playstyle. And with the fight evolving in such a subtle yet impactful way as you go along, watching her go more crazy, liberating herself to buff her weapons and damage with blood and fire, something she swore never to do after witnessing what happened at the fishing hamlet, it's truly a spectacle. Obviously, there are flaws, like whatever the fuck this attack is, and the fire in the third phase being a little unfair since it has lingering hitboxes, but the rest of this absolutely amazing skirmish more than makes up for them. Not to mention her absolutely incredible soundtrack, the fact she's perfect waifu material, and that the Astral Clock Tower provides one of the more beautiful arenas in the game. All of this is why I believe that Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower deserves a spot on this list as being one of the best bosses the series has to offer. Number 6, Champion Gunday. There are two completely different ways to go about fighting this boss. Since he's one of the easiest bosses to parry, you can end the fight fairly quickly, or at least melt through phase 1 without even seeing many of his attacks. Phase 2 doesn't change it all that much, it just adds a whole bunch of attacks to his arsenal that means your parry windows are more widespread and you just gotta stay back and watch out for what he does a little more. And admittedly, once you get really good at parrying the boss, it sort of alleviates how absolutely phenomenal this fight is. But of course, there are more to Champion's design than just being parried to death. The fight, if you parry him surely, is not as thrilling, but removing that shield from your kit makes it an entirely different experience, and based on that, I've put him on this list. Champion Gunday is Udex if he took an absurd amount of Adderall. Suddenly, Udex's coordinated swings and scarce follow-ups is transformed into a boss that is twice as aggressive, has longer combos, and has damage scaled for mid to end game, bending his body in ways that don't look possible while wearing armor in his efforts to swing his halberd in massive areas in front of him in order to deal damage. This all sounds pretty crazy, and it is, but this isn't a difficulty ranking, but all of this definitely makes the champion a very difficult fight. Phase 1 is basically phase 2, but slowed down. His attacks are telegraphed in such a way that it requires you to pay full attention to his body so you can predict what he's going to do next, because he has a lot of follow-ups that include extremely quick shoulder barging, turnaround kicks, and jumps into the air. And you better get ready for me to say this on every boss from here on out, but amongst all of these attacks, it never feels ridiculous or unreasonable at any point. Sure, it can feel bad getting hit by a very quick shoulder barge, but that's the thing, you have to expect this at the end of his combos. When phase 2 begins, he takes another dose of Adderall and becomes even faster, increasing the amount of attacks he has, the speed in which he moves around the arena, occasionally stabbing his halberd into the ground, swinging it upwards to spew debris that can hit and stun you. And that, at the core, is what I love about this boss fight. Champion Gunday uses absolutely everything in his arsenal to attack the player. His blade, his handle, his hands, his shoulder, his legs, his feet, his speed, the environment, all in such quick succession while also keeping it fair at all times, and it makes for undoubtedly one of the most thrilling boss battles in the Soulsborne series. Number 5, Pontiffs Sullivan. I'm not going to repeat what I just said about Champion Gunday in regards to parrying, as you don't need to hear it again. Pontiff has remained one of my favorite bosses in the series and my second favorite boss in Dark Souls 3 ever since my first playthrough. I had heard rumors from friends of mine that suggested this series to me that Pontiff was extremely difficult but an absolutely amazing fight, and oh boy, I could not agree more. First off, it's the first boss in Dark Souls 3 that actually punishes you for roll spamming, as his attacks have such timings that you're gonna get roll caught if you start panic rolling. A strategy that's worked on every boss you possibly could have killed at this point in the game. Keeping in mind that difficulty does not necessarily make a boss good or bad, I think this is very good to Pontiff's design as a boss battle in Dark Souls. After all, the core of these games is to press your dodge button at the right time, right? If there's no right time and you're allowed to just spam the fuck out of it and get on unharmed, there's no real strategy, is there? Pontiff turns that around and gives you the middle finger. You have to painstakingly learn his moveset and his borderline unreasonable long combos in order to not get stun locked or roll caught. To counteract this, you do have plenty of opportunities to attack him after a few of his singular, less combinable attacks, making the fight primarily a balancing act of seriously picking and choosing your windows of punishment. Obviously, this can be totally voided by keeping distance and parrying, but the boss has more to its design than just being riposted and dying. Just as you've gotten used to his phase 1 moveset, he'll explode and summon a purple clone of himself. This is one of the best and fair gank designs From Software has ever done, behind Ornstein and Smo, of course.
Pontiff now attacks more scarcely in this phase, but his purple clone always starts off an attack before the actual Pontiff follows up with the same attack afterwards. This makes some of his combos more punishable, as if the purple clone gets too far away from him, he'll need some time to warp back. The purple version doesn't do as much damage as Pontiff himself, so even if you do get hit by it, you can anticipate the exact same attack from Pontiff afterwards. I think the design of this battle is absolutely incredible. Having a less dangerous Phantom that does enough damage to scare you but not quite kill you be the first one to attack you with the main boss mirroring him afterwards with even more damage is fantastic. Not to mention as well that you can actually kill the purple version if you wanted to, making the fight a 1v1 again with Pontiff still in his slightly less aggressive state. He's totally open for punishment as he's spawning the clone, so definitely watch out for that. With Pontiffs Sullivan being the first boss in the game to seriously punish you for roll spamming, dealing a brutal but fair amount of damage with his swords and having a perfectly balanced second phase with him mirroring his less dangerous phantoms, I think he is well deserving of a spot in the top 10 bosses in the Souls series. Number 4, Manus, Father of the Abyss. Before I even played Dark Souls, I had heard rumors of Manus, Artorias, and Calamite for their amazing design and difficulty as bosses, and I couldn't agree more. Although I'm not too much of a fan of Artorias and Calamite, Manus is a boss I absolutely adore. Considering he's a Dark Souls 1 boss, Manus has a crazy large amount of branching combos for all of his attacks. And like the Cleric Beast, Lawrence, and the Demon of Hatred, Manus has a much larger left arm, and he uses it in this fight a whole bunch. In his smaller hand, he holds his catalyst that he uses in combination with his suspiciously girthy arm to unleash many somewhat standard slams and swings. As I said though, he has many branching combos that he can unleash that Manus requires you to very carefully analyze his movements to determine which ones can and cannot be punished. A lot of his combos leave him breathing at the end as if he's out of breath, which is ample time to get a couple of hits in. And this is something I very much love about the fight with Manus. His punishment windows are short and sweet. Maybe he lets you get 1 hit in, maybe 3 if you're lucky, but you have to constantly be mindful of his potentially extremely fast returns. Manus has access to 3 different magic attacks, one where you have to dodge at extremely precise timing to his side to not get hit by a shotgun magic attack, one that requires you to run as far away from him as possible, and one that requires you to get as close to him as possible. This shotgun attack is my one and only flaw with this battle. I think it's way too precise with the timing unless you have the flip ring, and it'll almost definitely one-shot you if you're not cheesing in full Havels. The other 2 and all the rest of his attacks are completely balanced and only ever kill you if you make a mistake. Manus leaves plenty of time for you to hit him after the inward magic attack, which rewards you nicely for getting close to him quickly. One thing to watch out for is his wombo combo. Many people hate this stun lock, but I think it's fine. You only really get hit by it if you miss the initial extremely well coordinated attack at the beginning. Very occasionally he'll nip you at the end of your dodge and hit you with 4 of the remaining attacks, but it's possible you live this on anything below NG++. And as I mentioned before, this wombo combo gives you an opportunity to both heal and punish him afterwards, again rewarding you for successfully avoiding it. Manus is also one of the most influential and involved bosses when it comes to the lore of the games, but as I said, I'm steering away from that if I can. Manus, Father of the Abyss, is a fantastic boss fight offering balanced and fair punishment windows that are short and sweet in a beautifully eerie arena that is of more than sufficient size for the player to run away from him if needed, and it's for all these reasons that I believe he is well deserving of a spot in my list of the best Soulsborne bosses. Number 3, Ludwig the Accursed and Ludwig the Holy Blade. If you know anything about Soulsborne, you'll know that Ludwig is one of the series' most well-known and is unanimously one of the best bosses in the franchise. This absolutely disgusting abomination of a healing church hunter turned into a horse is a 2-phase boss fight with both phases being as close to perfect as the other 2 bosses to come on this list. First phase involves him simply dashing at you using his claws and swiping at you. He's one of the most aggressive bosses in the series, as expected from a high-ranking Bloodborne boss, and can close the distance on you extremely quickly with different leap attacks and charges. Sound is very important when battling Ludwig. His attacks are telegraphed well not only by some obvious wind-up animations, but the noises he makes. Some attacks, like the one where he jumps forward a short distance, has its own unique scream, and another where he jumps into the air for 4 seconds has an audio cue for when to dodge. This is something scarcely used in boss battles, and I'm so happy they made it a part of Ludwig's. A lot of his attacks allow you to get behind him and attack him while his combo finishes, which balances out a lot of his aggression. He
He also makes perfect use of the limb staggers that Bloodborne has. It doesn't allow you to absolutely cheese the hell out of him like Vicar Amelia and the one Reborn, but also presents many more fresh windows to punish him. If you're far away from him, he'll spew ice at you that has deceptive reach and crazy damage. His swipes come at you from all angles, and the game rewards you massively for being as aggressive as you can and utilizing as many attack windows as possible. Once you get through this phase, the Moonlight Sword makes a phenomenal and exhilarating appearance, and Ludwig takes it into combat. With some absolutely fantastic music, this phase is thrilling and extremely challenging, just like his first phase. Ludwig will leave you very small windows to attack and heal, swinging the Moonlight Sword and sending waves of moonlight your way. The size of the sword does not determine how fast the swings are with this guy. He can flail that sword around as fast as Eileen can her Blades of Mercy, has combos that are extremely difficult to keep track of, mixes up which ways he swings frequently, unleashes different AoE attacks, one of which being followed with an insane beam of moonlight that can potentially one-shot you, but once again rewards you by giving you ample time to hit Ludwig for some crazy damage. And it truly does feel like a reward for getting behind him and learning his moveset, something I appreciate sincerely during boss fights. As I said with Manus, his many branching and seemingly endless slam combos offer plenty of short and sweet punishment windows, balancing out his aggression to make room for fairness. Just like in phase 1, it's possible to stun him and even riposte him for massive damage, and there's nothing like ending this incredible fight with a gruesome visceral attack. Ludwig the Accursed and Ludwig the Holy Blade is the perfect beginning to a near perfect DLC in one of my favorite video games of all time, and I think everyone will agree when I say that he is well deserving of a space on this list as being one of the best bosses the series has to offer. Number 2, Orphan of Kos. I didn't think I'd ever have to talk about this sporadic screaming fetus once again, but here we are. This is also one of those bosses that's renowned for being one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult boss in the entire franchise. While I do not disagree with that statement, after all, I ranked him the hardest boss in Bloodborne, the Orphan of Kos is also my favorite in the game for many different reasons. First off, this boss is absolutely insane. He acts exactly like a newborn baby would do, grabbing the closest thing to him, which just so happens to be Mother Kos's placenta, and mindlessly flails it around without any sort of thought of what it's doing. Because of this, it's just crazy. Despite dying to this boss countless times when doing my stupid challenge runs of Bloodborne, I still find him somewhat difficult to read sometimes because he has so many attacks he can do at so many distances. You don't know if he's going to jump back and slingshot his placenta at you, whether he's going to hold his ground and throw attacks your direction, or if he's going to get even closer to you, pushing you and his weapon forward. Just as you thought you've discovered his entire moveset, he'll actually throw placenta juice at you if you get too far away from him. And if you're too close to him, he'll sometimes throw some of this juice into the ground and make a big circle explode in front of him. Phase 1 is very fast. He can close the distance on you deceivingly quickly with some of the highest damage in Bloodborne, has a health bar the size of a double-decker bus, an extremely varied and difficult moveset to deal with, and demands that you painstakingly learn him so that you understand what he's going to do next. He relentlessly swings his weapon around him, dealing an overwhelming amount of damage and leaving what feels like no time at all to back up and heal. He frequently throws his juices at you, shoves it into the ground to unleash a hard-hitting, deceptively large AoE attack, leaps backwards, flinging his weapon at you, lifts it above his head to slam it into your face, charges at you, dragging it across the floor, swings it around him in a full circle twice over, mindlessly swings it in front of him in a mini frenzy, and he does all of this in such quick succession that healing feels like an impossible gamble. Phase 1 Orphan of Kos is a top 10 worthy boss of greatness and difficulty in and of itself, but it all goes absolutely crazy when Phase 2 starts. You thought Phase 1 was aggressive? Well, prepare for single-handedly the most chaotic and insanely aggressive boss fight in this series. Orphan takes everything from Phase 1 and makes it 3 times faster. He dashes around the arena and into the air, throwing juice at you, slams it mercilessly in your direction, summons the power of the Great Ones to unleash lightning across the entire arena, bending and swinging all over the place with insane reach with his weapon and dealing absurd amounts of damage. Yet, as I've said with previous bosses, and I'll say again for the next one, it never feels unfair. I always credit FromSoft for making chaotic and seemingly impossibly difficult bosses completely fair. You can parry Orphan throughout both of his phases, and it's not the most difficult thing in the world to do, but it does not stop this fight from being absolutely perfect balance of unrelenting difficulty and complete and utter fairness. Once you get used to his moveset, it's still the most difficult boss in the game, but I've never been hit to something that hasn't been my own fault on my last hundreds of times fighting him. I've gone on way too long about this boss, but it's that perfect balance that I believe makes Orphan of Kos the second best boss in the Soulsborne series. Before we go on to the best boss though, I'm going to shamelessly interrupt and advertise my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/mynameiscosmic, where I play too much Soulsborne, and I'd love to see you there. And number 1, Slave Knight Gale. Of course, From Software could not end the final DLC of the Dark Souls series that it is today without giving us one final love letter. Slave Knight Gale is unanimously one of the best bosses in the series, and for me, he takes the cake as being the all-time best. Admittedly, it's going to be difficult talking about Gale because I feel like he's what would come out if the Abyss Watchers and Orphan of Kos had a baby. He knows how to use that sword of his, and his lanky posture complements his sporadic swinging style. His attacks aren't by any means particularly difficult to dodge in the first phase, but his enormous health bar means that you have to take advantage of any window of punishment you can find. Gale provides them, but also provides many different combos that will require you to manage stamina carefully. Some combos end with him jumping back and leaping at you sword first. That is one such attack that if you accommodate for, can give you a good window to punish. He also has guaranteed staggers to balance out his ginormous health bar and helps you get more aggressive, or allow you to get a nice healing window if you need it. And just as you get used to his moveset in phase 1, he finds the power in the Dark Soul and gets up to unleash his second phase. This time it's not only his sword you have to worry about. His cape adds damage to his attacks and can whip you on its own. He can whip out a rapid fire crossbow sometimes and can even throw magic boomerangs at you. His fighting style changes slightly with Gale now standing on his own 2 legs, swinging his sword in many different ways, often followed by his cape that make precise dodges even more essential. And it's not over yet. He has a subliminal third phase, which means he explodes into blood orbs, which will then land on the ground and summon lightning orbs wherever they landed. In amongst the chaotic explosions, flying blood orbs, and lightning scorching the ground, Gale's sporadically flying around the arena throwing attacks in your direction. And hey, I said I'd say it again, one of the most beautiful things about this boss fight is that it never feels unfair. There's time between when the orbs hit the ground and when the lightning hits that gives you ample time to watch Gale before it strikes, allowing you to reposition or go ham on the boss if you're able to. As I mentioned earlier, Gale's attacks aren't particularly difficult to dodge like Orphan's, but I cannot appropriately promulgate how much this boss just oozes beauty. Once again, FromSoft have delivered us a very aggressive boss that on paper sounds borderline unfair with so much going on, but really isn't. There is a reason why Slave Knight Gale is considered one of the best bosses in the Soulsborne series, if not the best by a substantial percentage of players. And even on my what could be 300th playthrough of this game, Gale is always a boss I look forward to. It's yet another boss that perfectly balances aggression with fairness, accompanied by gorgeous music, a boss arena with beauty to match Gaemon and the burnt Ivory Kings, and is undoubtedly one of the most satisfying and near flawless boss battles in the Soulsborne series. And there we have it. Those are the 10 best bosses in this series in my opinion. Let me know what your top 10 bosses are in the comments below. Before leaving a comment wondering where your favorite boss is and telling me I'm wrong, please bear in mind that how good or bad a boss is completely subjective and everyone has the right to their own opinion, and this video was simply mine. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more like this, then subscribe to the channel and click the playlist in the description to see my other boss ranking videos. Also consider checking out my Twitch and my other social media, yada yada. Thanks again for watching everyone, praise the sun, and I'll see you next time.